What if the truth you cling to was never yours to grasp? What if every certainty you hold, every belief etched into your soul like scripture in stone, is but a reflection cast by another's flame, a flame you were taught to worship without ever seeing its source? You walk through life convinced of your own sovereignty. Yet how often have you paused to question the voice that whispers doubts in your ear, disguised as your own reason? There is a serpent in the garden of your mind. It does not hiss. It speaks with your voice, echoing commands from an authority you never appointed. Imagine chains so light they feel like freedom. Imagine lies so gentle they caress your skin like morning breeze, while binding you tighter than iron. This is the art of gaslighting. Not crude deception, but the quiet dismantling of your inner compass. Not brute force, but the slow poisoning of your trust in what you once knew to be real. And the most exquisite cruelty of it all, you are made to believe the madness is yours alone, that the world bends rightly while you are the one who wavers, when in truth, you are the only one still trying to stand straight in a crooked universe, who taught you to distrust your instincts, who planted the seed that blossoms now into second-guessing eyes, hesitant speech, trembling confidence. Was it the parent who smiled while cutting deeper than any blade? The lover who claimed to adore you while reshaping your memories like clay? Or perhaps the society that applauds your obedience while calling it progress? Every time you blinked at reality and were told you misunderstood, a thread was pulled from the fabric of your self-trust. Until now, you wear a garment full of holes, unaware you were once clothed in certainty. You search for answers in mirrors that do not reflect, in books that rewrite themselves overnight, in voices that promise clarity, but speak only in riddles meant to confuse. But ask yourself this: why do those who claim to love you flinch when you begin to see? Why do they rush to soothe the awakening with honeyed words and careful silences? For the moment you remember who you truly are, their illusion crumbles, and with it, their dominion over your will. To doubt yourself is not weakness. It is a final triumph of those who fear your becoming. So stand now, if you dare, on the edge of vertigo, where all truths tremble and meaning dissolve before it is reforged. This is not a lesson. It is a reckoning, a descent into the labyrinth where the monster wears your face and speaks in your tongue. And only by walking to the fire of uncertainty, by embracing the chaos that others call madness, will you discover whether you are merely a puppet of borrowed beliefs or something far more terrifying, free. You have always believed yourself sovereign, the master of your thoughts, the architect of your will. But what if the throne upon which you sit is not yours? What if every decision you call your own was carved from suggestion? Every doubt you feel was planted by hands you never saw. The mind is not a fortress. It is a mirror, and mirrors do not choose what they reflect. They are told what to show. And for years, perhaps decades, someone has been whispering behind you, shaping your reflection until you no longer recognize your own face. Can you remember the first time you questioned your memory? That moment when certainty cracked like thin ice beneath your feet? Perhaps it was subtle, a smile that said you misunderstood, a pause that implied you're imagining things, a sentence that lingered in the air long after it was spoken. Are you sure that's how it happened? At first, you laughed it off. You blamed fatigue, stress, even your own imperfection. But then came more. Small corrections, gentle reminders, a slow erosion of confidence, disguised as concern, and slowly, imperceptibly, you began to listen not to your senses, but to their interpretation of them. Your truth became theirs. And now, when you speak it, you hear their voice. There's a name for this, gaslighting. But names are only doors, not answers. Behind them lie corridors of meaning, twisting staircases of intention, rooms where light flickers just enough to cast shadows on everything you once trusted. To understand gaslighting is not to dissect its mechanics, but to feel its weight, to know how it feels when your mind becomes a battleground, when your thoughts are no longer entirely your own, when your instincts scream warnings you've been taught to silence. It is to live in exile within your own consciousness, surrounded by familiar voices that echo with unfamiliar intent. Ask yourself, who benefits from your doubt? Who gains power when your self-trust crumbles like dry leaves between trembling fingers? There are those who feed on uncertainty, who thrive in a fog you cannot seem to clear. They do not need to shout to control you. They only need to make you question. One word at a time, one hesitation, one moment of confusion. They do not break your will, they soften it. They do not erase your truth, they blur it. And in that blur, they insert themselves. Their version becomes yours. Their reality replaces your own, until you begin to forget what it felt like to be certain. This is not madness. This is design. Gaslighting is not an accident. It is architecture, a structure built around your soul, brick by insidious brick, mortar made of misplaced guilt and carefully timed contradictions. You were never meant to notice the walls closing in, only to adjust, to adapt, to survive within them. And so you did. You learned to second-guess your emotions, to distrust your perceptions, to apologize for your memories. You became fluent in the language of ambiguity, speaking in questions instead of declarations, in hesitations instead of affirmations. And all the while they smiled, because they knew something you had forgotten. You were still there, beneath the layers, beneath the conditioning, beneath the fog, waiting. What does it mean to awaken? Not suddenly, not dramatically, but slowly, like dawn breaking over a land long buried in snow. Awakening begins with discomfort, with the itch of a thought that refuses to be ignored, with the quiet rebellion of a memory that insists on being remembered. It begins when you look into the mirror and realize the reflection does not match the person you feel yourself to be. When you speak and hear another's tone in your voice. When you dream and wake knowing something was taken from you, not stolen, but borrowed. Borrowed indefinitely, under the pretense of protection. And yet, there is terror in remembering, because to reclaim your truth means to confront the one who stole it, not with fists or fire, but with awareness, with the unbearable clarity that comes when illusions fall away. And illusions are comforting, even painful ones. At least they provide structure. At least they offer the illusion of stability. To see through them is to stand in a void, unsure what remains. But sometimes, the only way forward is through collapse. Think of the child who was told their pain was too much, who learned to shrink their tears, mute their voice, fold their anger into silence. Think of the lover who gave up their intuition because it was called paranoia. Think of the worker who abandoned ambition because it was labeled arrogance. These are not choices. These are concessions extracted under pressure. And each one left a scar, invisible, internal, permanent. Until now, until you begin to trace those scars back to their source. Until you stop blaming yourself for wounds inflicted elsewhere. Gaslighting is not merely manipulation. It is theft. Theft of perception. Theft of identity. Theft of the right to trust oneself without apology. And like any thief, those who practice it depend on your complicity. They count on your willingness to believe the lie, to accept the distortion, to keep playing the role assigned to you. But what happens when you refuse? What happens when you say, "This is not me," not loudly, not angrily, but with the quiet finality of someone who has seen too much to pretend otherwise? You begin to unravel, not in chaos, but in release, like threads pulled from a tapestry that no longer fits. You start to notice the patterns that once seemed natural, the way conversations always end with you feeling smaller, the way decisions always tilt in their favor, the way your words are twisted before they reach your own ears. You begin to map the labyrinth, not to escape, but to understand, to walk its corridors with open eyes, to stop fearing the echoes that once convinced you were alone. And here lies the paradox. The deeper you go, the less alone you become, because gaslighting thrives in isolation, in the belief that your experience is unique, invalid, unworthy of witness. But when you begin to speak, not to accuse, not to blame, but simply to say, "This is what I felt," something shifts. Others hear you. Not all, but some. And in their silence, in their recognition, in their own hesitant confessions, you find proof. You were never truly mad, just seen through the wrong lens. To awaken is not to suddenly possess all truths. It is to stop accepting others' versions as absolute. It is to hold space for contradiction, for uncertainty, for the uncomfortable possibility that you were shaped, not broken, that you were molded, not erased, that you were lied to, not irreparably damaged. The damage lies not in the deception itself, but in the belief that you must carry forever, and that belief can be unlearned. But unlearning is not passive. It is not a gentle process. It is excavation. It is confrontation. It is a willingness to sit with the discomfort of realizing that much of what you believed about yourself was not born within you, but imposed upon you. It is a courage to ask, who am I when no one is watching? Who am I when no one is correcting me? Who am I when the voice that whispered you're wrong finally falls silent? And in that silence, something stirs, something ancient, something untouched by manipulation, by doubt, by fear. A presence that has waited patiently beneath the noise. A voice that speaks not in commands, but in knowing, not in accusation, but in clarity, not in rage, but in peace. And when you finally hear it, not as an idea, but as a living truth, you'll understand you were never lost. You were only waiting for the moment when the fog would lift, when the chains would rattle loud enough to be heard, when the reflection in the mirror would blink at the same time you do, waiting for the breath that says, "Here I am," waiting for yourself. You have walked through the fire and emerged not unscathed, but unshackled, not untouched, but transformed. The echoes of doubt still linger. They always will. But now you recognize their origin. You no longer mistake whispers for truth, nor confusion for weakness. What was once a prison of the mind has become a temple of awareness. And in that temple, you are both the pilgrim and the flame. The world will continue to spin its illusions. The voices may not fall silent, but now you know how to listen, not with fear, but with discernment. You carry within you the most dangerous weapon against manipulation, self-trust, not the fragile kind built on approval, but the unshakable kind forged in the crucible of self-confrontation. It is not loud. It does not demand validation. It simply is, like the mountain that does not apologize for standing. Do you feel it? That quiet tremor beneath your ribs. The awakening of something ancient, something buried beneath years of borrowed truths and softened mirrors. This is not the end of your journey. It is the first breath of a life lived without permission, a life where your voice is your own again, where your memories are sacred, where your reality is not up for negotiation. And now, as you stand at the edge of becoming, ask yourself this. If you were never truly lost, then what have you been waiting for? If this has stirred in you a recognition too deep to ignore, then do not turn away. Like this video, not as applause, but as affirmation. Share it, not as noise, but as signal. Subscribe, not out of habit, but out of hunger. For there is more to uncover, more shadows to illuminate, more chains to loosen, one link at a time. But above all, stay here in this space of questioning. Let the discomfort settle. Let the silence speak. Because the truest transformation does not happen in the moment you watch. It happens in the moment you remember. And that moment is coming. It already began.